A report released Wednesday by the racial justice organization, the Movement for Black Lives, finds that the Justice Department under President Donald Trump had intentionally targeted BLM protesters with prosecutions in order to, of course, disrupt their movement for Black Lives. Now, the report, which was first shared by the with the Associated Press, was conducted in partnership with the Creating Law Enforcement Accountability and Responsibility Clinic at the City University of New York School of Law. Based on analysis of 326 criminal cases filed by federal prosecutors in connection with the protests from May 31st to October 25th of last year, the groups found that much of the drive to use federal charges against protesters stemmed from top-down directives from Donald Trump and former Attorney General William Barr. So I don't think that we're all surprised by this, but they say that these directives were meant to disrupt the movement and were the primary reason for the unprecedented federalization of protest-related prosecutions seen in 2020. So, I wonder if there's any reason they wanted to do that. Can anybody think of it? Oh, right. They hate black people. It's racism. And look, they also wanted to punish people calling for black people just to not get shot and killed by police if they're unarmed, which we have seen happen over and over and over and over again. Again, Tamir Rice, Eric Garner, Walter Scott, George Floyd, on and on. The list goes on. Oh, but Tamir Rice, as we start, he had a toy gun. He had a toy. And look, they literally shot him within 3 seconds. Not even enough time to say, drop the weapon, which didn't even turn out to be a real gun. If everybody's buying that, I mean, he was dangerous. Come on. All right, so now here's the thing. The DOJ under Trump did not want to solve that problem. They didn't want to hear about that problem because in their minds, what the police did in all those circumstances that led to the deaths of innocent people were correct. And that goes to, of course, the systemic problem where Black lives are not, they don't matter to people, which is, again, the whole reason that we have Black Lives Matter, to remind people that they do. But again, for them, they think, well, of course, having an unarmed black person, of course, they deserve to be shot. So, yes, even if they have a toy gun, or even if they have no gun, no weapon, even if they're running away, that's okay. We can shoot them in the back. Don't you know how dangerous they are? No, you're dangerous. You're the one shooting people. You're the ones running around with access to heavy weaponry, oftentimes, and a badge that lets you shoot anybody and qualified immunity. You're the danger. Again, the officer that killed Daniel Shaver, that's Philip Brailsford, literally had an AR-15 weapon with "you're fucked" carved into the barrel. That's what we have. That's what we have. All right. So no, they are dangerous. And unfortunately, because of the qualified immunity, and of course the federal government, people like William Barr and of course Trump and Republicans mainly, it's still quite rare for police to be held accountable for what they're doing. For every Derek Chauvin that does get held accountable, you still have Philip Brailsford's Daniel Pantaleo, who's the guy who choked out Eric Garner, the officers who killed Tamir Rice, or the one's responsible for killing Breonna Taylor, not getting held accountable for their deaths. Look, some of those people in certain cases, they might lose their job and then get hired somewhere else. But the important thing is that they don't really ever see the inside of a courtroom, because you have grand juries that decide, oh no, we're not even going to bring them in for charges, no indictments, or they get let off by our justice system. And so you have this mindset, these people that, have this racism inherent in the system and defend it, and end up targeting Black Americans who are just trying to fight for their lives. But there's more. The organizations also noted that the DOJ and the directives, as well as statements about the protests, would paint the image of protesters as violent radicals. And the government justified the expanded use of its authority and deployment of federal enforcement due to what it claimed was local and state leaders' abdication of their law enforcement responsibilities in deference to this quote-unquote violent assault. Violent assault. So, again, we saw that not only with the Trump administration, of course, painting them as super violent and dangerous, terrible, but of course Fox News. Of course, Fox News would show the same like burning, Arby's or something in the background every time they talk about BLM. 93% of the protests were entirely peaceful, and yet they showed the same thing over and over again, the same footage. Why? Because they're pushing a narrative. They're pushing that narrative, which again, of course, gets picked up by Donald Trump, or I don't know, vice versa. But there is this, this weird, like circle jerk vampirism kind of thing going on between, at that time, the White House and Fox News and the Justice Department, where I guess he would get his talking points from Fox News, and then go enact actual policy based on that. Fox News says, Black people protesting against police brutality, dangerous radicals. And he says, well, I got to send the military. I have no choice. No choice. No choice. But here's the thing. Again, millions of people marched for Black lives. 93% peaceful. Vast majority. And of course, this is in the face of, in a lot of places, overwhelming police presence. And sometimes police force, where police would actually, they would start this. They would start moving in on these protesters. They would start this violence. They would initiate it. And they, of course, would, kidnap people off the streets. Journalists would be arrested. Entire groups of people killed, and pelted with pepper balls and beanbag rounds and tear gas and all this stuff that would happen. And you want to tell me that the people who were protesting were the only violent ones? I'm not saying that there wasn't violence in these protests, but in the vast majority of the situations where there was violence, it was initiated by the police. Not all of them, but the majority of them. And this was, again, by design. And then to go in, and this is where it gets worse. Among other key findings was that the government had also exploited the vast, expansive criminal code in order to assert federal jurisdiction in cases that bore no federal interest. Noting that in nearly 93% of the criminal cases, there were similar state-level charges that could have been brought against the defendants. Of these cases where state crimes could have instead been filed, 88% of the federal charges had a more severe potential punishment than they would have at the state level. So the federal government comes in, and what about states' rights, right? The federal government comes in and says, oh no, we got this. Arrests people and then charges them with even harsher punishments than the state and local level would have charged them. You know why? It's because this wasn't about restoring order. Understand, this isn't about peaceful, keeping protests peaceful and punishing people who are rioters and things like that. No, this is about taking people and sending a message. That message is, if you try to hold police accountable and try to protect Black lives, we're coming for you. And we're going to throw the book at you. We're going to overcharge you with crimes. And by the way, a lot of the crimes would be like disorderly conduct or resisting arrest. That's a famous one. But they do that, overcharge people, and take charges to such ridiculous heights in order to make a point, a political point. And that point is, of course, bow your head, never challenge the police or the government when they are doing something wrong and harming these communities of color. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.